Hello, I am Mike.
Hello, I am Lily. Welcome to English Podcast Flow.
Today's episode is Learn English in Your Free Time. Easy tips. We all lead such busy lives these days, and it can be tough to fit everything in, so we thought we'd share some simple ways to practice English anytime, anywhere.
Yes, that's a great idea. I think a lot of people feel overwhelmed by the thought of studying English, especially if they don't have a lot of free time. But the truth is, you don't need hours and hours to make progress. Even small pockets of time can be really effective if you use them wisely.
I totally agree. Sometimes I feel like my brain is already overloaded with work and family stuff, so adding formal English study on top of that feels impossible. But I've found that incorporating English into things I'm already doing can make a big difference.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Instead of thinking about English as this separate thing you have to study, we're going to look at how to seamlessly weave it into your everyday life.
Sounds good to me. Where should we start?
Well, our first tip is all about making the most of your daily routine. It appears that learning a language can be quite passive. You don't always have to be actively studying grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary lists. You can actually absorb a lot just by listening to English while you're doing other things, kind of like how a sponge soaks up water.
I've definitely heard that before about passive learning, but I have to admit I'm a little skeptical. How can you really learn something if you're not actively focusing on it? Does your brain actually take in the information?
That's a great question. It might seem counterintuitive, but studies show that our brains are constantly processing information from our surroundings, even when we're not consciously paying attention. And this applies to language, too. When you expose yourself to English through podcasts, music, or even TV shows, your brain is still picking up patterns, rhythms, and vocabulary, even if you're not actively trying to decode every word.
So it's like your brain is working in the background, soaking up the language without you even realizing it.
Exactly. Think of it like this. Imagine you move to a new city and start hearing a new language spoken all around you. At first, it's just a jumble of sounds, right? But as you go about your daily life, you start to pick out certain words and phrases. Maybe you start to recognize the intonation patterns or the rhythm of the language. All of this is happening passively just through exposure.
That makes a lot of sense. I guess it's kind of like how I learned my first language as a baby. I didn't sit down with flashcards. I just absorbed the language from my environment.
Exactly. And while adults don't learn languages quite as easily as young children, we can still tap into that passive learning process. So instead of stressing about finding a huge chunk of time to study, try incorporating English into activities you're already doing. Listen to an English podcast while you're walking the dog, put on some English music while you're cooking dinner, or even have an English language TV show playing in the background while you're tidying up.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could work. It feels a lot less intimidating than thinking I have to sit down with a textbook every day.
Exactly. And the key here is consistency. It's better to listen to a short podcast every day than to binge watch an entire season of a TV show once a month. Regular, consistent exposure is what really helps your brain start to internalize the language.
Got it. So passive listening is all about finding ways to sneak English into your everyday life without making it feel like a chore.
That's a great way to put it. Now, our next tip builds on this idea of making small changes that can have a big impact on your language learning. This one involves something you probably use every single day: your phone.
My phone. What does that have to do with learning English?
Well, studies show that visual exposure to a language can also help with acquisition. Think about how many times a day you look at your phone. By simply switching your phone's language settings to English, you'll be constantly exposed to English words and phrases without even having to think about it.
Oh, I get it. It's like having mini English lessons sprinkled throughout my day just by checking my messages or scrolling through social media.
Exactly. And while it might feel strange at first, your brain will adapt surprisingly quickly. You'll start to intuitively understand what different icons and menus mean, and you'll be surprised how many words you start recognizing without even trying.
That's a really clever tip. It feels much more manageable than trying to memorize a list of vocabulary words. It's like learning by osmosis just by going about my normal routine.
I like how you put that. Now, speaking of visual learning, our third tip is one that a lot of people already enjoy: watching movies and TV shows.
Oh, I love this one. Curling up on the sofa with a good movie is my idea of a perfect evening. But how can I turn that into a language learning opportunity?
Well, the key is to think about how you can use subtitles strategically. Studies show that starting with English subtitles can be really helpful, especially if you're a beginner.
Wait, English subtitles. Wouldn't it be better to use subtitles in my native language so I can understand everything?
It might seem counterintuitive, but using English subtitles actually helps you connect the spoken words with the written form, which can be really beneficial for pronunciation and vocabulary acquisition. Plus, you're still getting the visual context from the movie, so you're not completely lost.
I see. It's like having a built-in dictionary right there on the screen.
Mhm.
So I'm reading the words as I'm hearing them spoken, which helps my brain make those connections.
Exactly. And as you get more comfortable, you can challenge yourself by occasionally turning off the subtitles altogether and seeing how much you can understand just by listening.
That's a good idea. It's like a little test to see how much I'm improving.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to rewind and listen to certain sections again if you didn't quite catch everything. The goal is not to understand every single word, but to gradually train your ear to the sounds and rhythms of English.
Okay, I'm definitely going to try that. It makes watching movies feel much more productive knowing that I'm also learning English at the same time.
Mm.
What other tips do you have for us?
Well, for our next tip, let's dive into the world of reading.
Reading. I have to admit, I'm not much of a bookworm these days. I feel like I barely have time to read the news, let alone a whole novel.
I totally understand. But the good news is you don't have to read War and Peace to benefit from reading in English. Even short bursts of reading can make a difference. Studies show that regular reading exposes you to new vocabulary and grammar structures, and it also helps to improve your comprehension skills.
So even if I just read a short article or a blog post each day, that could still help me improve my English.
Absolutely. It appears that the key is consistency. Try to make reading in English a daily habit, even if it's just for a few minutes at a time. And it doesn't have to be anything too challenging. You can start with simple things like news articles, blog posts, or even social media updates.
That's good to know. I often feel intimidated by the thought of reading a book in English, but I definitely wouldn't mind checking out some articles or blog posts on topics I'm interested in.
Exactly. And the beauty of reading is that you can do it at your own pace. If you come across a word you don't understand, you can look it up in a dictionary or use a translation app. And you can always reread sections as many times as you need to until you feel comfortable with the content.
That's reassuring. I think I'm starting to see how reading could actually be an enjoyable way to learn English as long as I don't put too much pressure on myself.
That's the perfect attitude to have. Now, our next tip might seem a little unusual, but it can be surprisingly effective for improving your speaking skills.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Have you ever heard of the idea of talking to yourself in English?
Talking to myself. Well, I do catch myself mumbling to myself sometimes, but I usually try to keep it quiet so people don't think I'm going crazy.
I understand the hesitation, but hear me out. Studies show that talking to yourself in a foreign language can actually be really beneficial. It helps you to practice forming sentences, to get comfortable with the sounds of the language, and to think in English without having to translate everything in your head.
Hmm, that's interesting. So even if I don't have anyone to practice speaking with, I can still get some benefit from just talking to myself.
Exactly. It might feel awkward at first, but the more you do it, the more natural it will become. And you don't have to have long, complex conversations with yourself. You can start by simply describing what you're doing as you go about your day. For example, you could say things like, I'm making breakfast now, or I'm going for a walk.
I see. It's like narrating my own life in English.
That's a great way to think about it. And as you get more comfortable, you can start to have internal dialogues with yourself where you ask yourself questions and then answer them in English. For example, you could ask yourself, what are my plans for the weekend? And then answer in English, outlining your plans.
Okay. I'm willing to give it a try. It definitely feels less intimidating than trying to have a conversation with a native speaker.
And you know, it can be quite fun too. Sometimes I find myself having full-blown debates with myself in English, and it's a great way to practice expressing different opinions and viewpoints.
I love that idea. I'm already starting to brainstorm some topics I could argue with myself about.
Wonderful. Now for our next tip, we're going to shift gears a bit and talk about how to incorporate English learning into your digital life. Specifically, let's talk about social media.
Social media. I spend way too much time on social media already, but I'm all for finding ways to make it more educational.
Exactly. It appears that social media can be a fantastic tool for language learning. Think about it. You're already spending time scrolling through your feed, so why not use that time to expose yourself to English?
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah.
What's the best way to do that?
Well, for starters, you can follow English language accounts that interest you. Whether it's news organizations, celebrities, comedians, or even educational pages, there's a wealth of content out there to choose from. And because social media posts tend to be short and snappy, it's a less overwhelming way to consume English content.
I like that idea. I often feel intimidated by long articles or books. but short social media posts feel much more digestible.
Exactly. And by following accounts that align with your interest, you're more likely to stay engaged and enjoy the learning process. Plus, you'll be exposed to authentic language, including slang idioms and everyday expressions that you might not find in textbooks.
That's a good point. I'm always trying to expand my vocabulary beyond the textbook stuff, so this seems like a great way to do that.
Absolutely. And don't forget about the visual element of social media. Many posts include images or videos, which can help you understand the context and make the language more memorable.
So it's like a multi-sensory learning experience.
Exactly. And you can even take it a step further by interacting with the content. Leave comments in English, reply to stories, or even send direct messages to accounts that you enjoy following.
Okay, that's a bit more challenging, but I like the idea of pushing myself to actually use the language.
And who knows, you might even make some new friends along the way.
Now that would be a bonus. Okay, so we've covered passive listening, visual learning through movies and our phones, reading short snippets, talking to ourselves, and now using social media. What else is there?
Well, our next tip taps into the power of music. Have you ever found yourself singing along to English songs, even if you don't understand all the words?
Oh, all the time. Sometimes I even make up my own words if I can't figure out the lyrics.
That's great. Studies show that music can be a powerful tool for language learning. It engages different parts of our brains, which can help with memory and pronunciation. Plus, it's just plain fun.
I agree. I find it much easier to remember words and phrases when they're set to a catchy tune.
Exactly. And there are so many ways to use music to improve your English. You can start by simply listening to English songs and trying to pick out words and phrases that you understand. Then you can look up the lyrics online and follow along as you listen.
That's a good idea. I often mishear lyrics, so it'd be helpful to see them written down.
And once you feel comfortable with the lyrics, you can sing along. Don't worry about being perfect. The goal is just to get your mouth moving and to practice making the sounds of the language.
Okay, I can definitely do that.
Yeah.
I just hope my neighbors don't mind my off-key singing.
I'm sure they'll appreciate your enthusiasm. And you don't have to limit yourself to just listening to music. You can also explore other forms of audio learning like podcasts.
Podcasts. I've heard of them, but I've never actually listened to one.
You're missing out. Podcasts are like radio shows on demand. You can find podcasts on just about any topic imaginable, from news and current events to history, science, comedy, and even language learning.
Wow, that's amazing. So I could basically learn about anything I'm interested in while also improving my English.
Exactly. And the beauty of podcasts is that you can listen to them while you're doing other things like commuting, exercising, or doing chores.
That's perfect. I often feel like I waste so much time during my commute, but now I can use that time to learn something new.
Exactly. And there are even podcasts specifically designed for English language learners.
Really? That sounds even better.
Yes. These podcasts often feature slower speaking speeds, clearer pronunciation, and explanations of vocabulary and grammar.
So it's like having a personal English tutor in my pocket.
That's a great way to put it. And just like with music, you can adjust the level of difficulty as you progress. Start with podcasts that are geared towards beginners, and then gradually work your way up to more challenging ones.
This is all starting to sound really appealing. I'm definitely going to check out some podcasts and see what I can find.
I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by the variety and quality of content out there.
So we've got music and podcasts. Any other audio learning tips?
Well, there's one more that I think is worth mentioning, and that's audiobooks.
Audiobooks. Aren't those just for people who don't like to read?
Not at all. Audiobooks can be a fantastic way to immerse yourself in English, even if you enjoy reading traditional books. Think of it like having a professional storyteller read to you.
That actually sounds quite relaxing.
It can be. And just like with podcasts, you can find audiobooks on a wide variety of topics, from classic literature to contemporary bestsellers.
So I could listen to Pride and Prejudice while doing the dishes.
Exactly. And, listening to audiobooks can be particularly helpful for improving your pronunciation and comprehension. You're hearing the words spoken correctly, and you can always rewind and listen to sections again if you need to.
That's a good point. I often struggle with pronunciation, so this could be a really helpful way to improve.
Absolutely. And if you're a visual learner, you can even follow along with the text in a physical book or e-reader.
Okay, that sounds even better. I like the idea of seeing the words as I'm hearing them.
Now, as we wrap up this section on audio learning, I wanted to emphasize the importance of active listening. It's not enough to just have English playing in the background. You need to actively engage with the material.
What do you mean by active listening?
Well, it involves paying attention to the sounds, the rhythms, and the intonation of the language. Try to pick out key words and phrases and try to understand the overall message of what's being said.
So it's not just about hearing the words, it's about understanding them.
Exactly. And you can make active listening easier by choosing materials that are appropriate for your level. Don't start with a podcast on quantum physics if you're a beginner. Choose something that's engaging but not too overwhelming.
Good advice. I'd rather start with something I can actually understand.
Exactly. And remember, you can always adjust the difficulty as you progress. The goal is to find that sweet spot where you're challenged but not frustrated.
Okay, I'm getting the hang of this. Active listening, starting with easier materials, and gradually increasing the difficulty. Got it.
Now for our next tip, let's move beyond the digital world and explore some ways to practice English in real-life settings.
Real-life settings. I thought we were talking about learning English in our free time, not signing up for classes or anything like that.
You don't necessarily have to sign up for classes, but there are definitely ways to incorporate English practice into your daily life outside of the digital realm. For example, have you ever considered finding a language exchange partner?
A language exchange partner. What's that?
It's basically someone who is learning your native language and is willing to exchange conversation time with you. So you would spend some time speaking English with them, and then they would spend some time speaking your native language with you.
That's a really cool idea. But where would I find someone like that?
There are actually websites and apps specifically designed for connecting language exchange partners. You can create a profile, specify the languages you're learning and the languages you can teach, and then browse through profiles of other users.
That sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And what are the benefits of having a language exchange partner?
Well, for starters, it's a fantastic way to get real-life speaking practice. It's one thing to practice speaking to yourself or to listen to recordings, but it's a whole different experience to have a real-time conversation with another person.
I can imagine. I always get nervous when I have to speak English to someone else. But maybe having a language exchange partner would help me feel more comfortable.
That's definitely a common benefit. And it's not just about practicing speaking. It's also about cultural exchange. You can learn about your partner's culture and they can learn about yours. It's a great way to broaden your horizons and make new friends.
That's a great point. I love learning about different cultures, and this seems like a really fun and engaging way to do that.
Absolutely. And, you don't have to meet your language exchange partner in person. You can connect with people from all over the world via video chat or even just through text messaging.
That's good to know. I'm not always comfortable meeting new people in person, but I'd definitely be open to chatting online.
And you never know, you might even get to travel to your partner's country someday and practice your language skills in person.
Yeah, that would be an adventure. Okay, so we've got language exchange partners. What other real-life opportunities are there for practicing English?
Well, have you ever considered attending cultural events that are conducted in English?
Cultural events? Like what?
Oh, there are so many possibilities. You could go to concerts, plays, art exhibitions, film festivals, or even lectures and workshops.
That's a great idea. I love going to cultural events, and I never thought about seeking out ones that are in English.
It's a fantastic way to immerse yourself in the language and culture, and you don't have to understand everything perfectly. The goal is just to expose yourself to the sounds of the language and to pick up on the context.
So even if I don't understand every word, I'm still benefiting from being in that environment.
Exactly. And, you might even find yourself striking up conversations with other attendees, which would give you a chance to practice your speaking skills.
That would be great. I'm always looking for opportunities to practice speaking, and this seems like a less intimidating setting than, say, going to a language exchange meetup.
That's a good point. And, attending cultural events can also be a great way to learn about different aspects of English-speaking cultures. You might discover a new band, a new artist, or even a new hobby.
I like that. It's like a multi-purpose activity. I'm learning English, I'm experiencing culture, and I'm potentially discovering new interests.
Exactly. Now for our next tip, we're going to talk about a way to practice English that's both rewarding and beneficial for your community. Volunteering.
Volunteering. That's a great idea. I've always wanted to volunteer more, but I never thought about it as a way to practice English.
It appears that volunteering can be a fantastic way to improve your language skills while also giving back to your community. Think about it. When you volunteer, you're often interacting with people from all walks of life, and many of them might speak English.
That's true. I never thought about it that way.
Exactly. It appears that volunteering can be a fantastic way to improve your language skills while also giving back to your community. Think about it. When you volunteer, you're often interacting with people from all walks of life, and many of them might speak English.
That's true. I never thought about it that way.
And because you're working towards a common goal, the pressure to speak perfectly is often lower. People are more focused on the task at hand than on your grammar or pronunciation.
That's reassuring. I always get nervous about making mistakes when I speak English, but I think I'd feel more relaxed in a volunteering setting.
And there are so many different volunteer opportunities available, so you can definitely find something that aligns with your interests. You could volunteer at a local library, a soup kitchen, an animal shelter, or even a museum.
Wow, that's a great list. I love animals, so maybe I could volunteer at an animal shelter and practice my English while caring for furry friends.
That's a wonderful idea. And, volunteering can also be a great way to meet new people and expand your social circle.
That's true. I'm always looking for ways to meet new people, and this seems like a really positive and meaningful way to do that.
Absolutely. Now for our next tip. Let's talk about how you can use technology to improve your pronunciation.
Pronunciation. That's one of my biggest challenges. I often feel self-conscious about my accent and my pronunciation.
It's a common concern. But the good news is there are many tools and resources available that can help you improve. One simple but effective technique is to use online pronunciation dictionaries and apps.
Online pronunciation dictionaries. I've never heard of those.
They're fantastic. You can type in a word, and the dictionary will play an audio recording of the correct pronunciation. Some dictionaries even offer different accents to choose from, so you can hear how the word is pronounced in different parts of the English-speaking world.
That's amazing. I often struggle with knowing how to pronounce words correctly, so this would be a really helpful tool.
Absolutely. And you can also use pronunciation apps, which often offer interactive exercises and games to help you practice specific sounds and intonation patterns.
Okay, I'm definitely going to check those out. It would be great to finally feel confident about my pronunciation.
And another helpful technique is to record yourself speaking English and then listen back to the recording.
Record myself. I don't know about that. I hate the sound of my own voice.
I understand. But it can be really illuminating. When we listen to recordings of ourselves, we often pick up on errors that we wouldn't notice otherwise.
That's true. I've definitely cringed at recordings of myself speaking in my native language, so maybe it would be even more helpful for English.
Exactly. And you don't have to share the recordings with anyone. It's just for your own personal practice.
Okay, I'm willing to give it a try. Maybe I can even record myself reading a passage from an audiobook and then compare my pronunciation to the narrator's.
That's a fantastic idea. Now for our next tip, we're going to talk about something that's essential for any language learner. Setting realistic goals.
Realistic goals. I'm all for setting goals, but I often find myself getting overwhelmed and giving up.
I understand. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of learning a new language and set unrealistic expectations for ourselves. We might think we'll be fluent in a few months, or we might try to cram too much information into our brains at once.
That's definitely me. I tend to be overly ambitious, and then I get discouraged when I don't see results quickly enough.
It appears that the key is to break down your larger goals into smaller, more manageable steps. Instead of aiming for fluency in a few months, focus on learning a few new words each day or on having a short conversation in English once a week.
So it's all about taking baby steps.
Exactly. And remember, progress is not always linear. There will be days when you feel like you're making great strides, and there will be days when you feel stuck.
That's comforting to hear.
Yeah.
I often beat myself up when I have a bad day, but maybe it's just part of the process.
Exactly. It's like learning any new skill. There will be ups and downs, but the important thing is to keep practicing and to celebrate your accomplishments along the way.
Okay, I'm starting to feel more motivated already. So instead of focusing on the big, scary goal of fluency, I should just focus on making small, consistent progress.
That's the perfect mindset. Now, for our final tip, we're going to address something that holds many language learners back: the fear of making mistakes.
The fear of making mistakes. Oh, I know that feeling all too well. I always worry about sounding stupid or saying the wrong thing.
It's a completely natural feeling, but it's important to remember that making mistakes is an essential part of the learning process. In fact, studies show that we learn more from our mistakes than from our successes.
Really? Why is that?
Well, when we make a mistake, it forces us to stop and think about what went wrong. We have to analyze the error, figure out the correct way to say it, and then try again.
So it's like a mini lesson in itself.
Exactly. And the more mistakes we make, the more opportunities we have to learn and improve. So instead of seeing mistakes as failures, try to see them as valuable learning experiences.
Okay, that's a really helpful way to look at it. But it's still hard to shake that feeling of embarrassment when I make a mistake, especially in front of other people.
I understand. But remember, everyone who learns a language makes mistakes. It's part of the journey. And most people are very understanding and supportive, especially if they know you're learning.
That's true. I've definitely been in situations where people have been patient with me as I've stumbled through my English.
And even native speakers make mistakes sometimes. It's part of the beauty of language. It's constantly evolving and changing.
Okay. I'm starting to feel a bit better about making mistakes. Maybe I can even try to laugh at myself when I mess up instead of getting flustered.
That's a great attitude to have. Remember, learning a language is a journey, not a destination. There will be bumps along the way, but the important thing is to keep practicing, to keep learning from your mistakes, and to enjoy the process.
Well said. I'm feeling much more confident about my English learning journey now.
I'm so glad to hear that. Remember, you have all the tools and resources you need to succeed. Just keep practicing, keep experimenting, and keep having fun.
I will. Thanks for all the great tips.
You're most welcome. So to wrap up our conversation today, we've talked about a lot of different simple but effective ways to sneak English practice into your daily routine.
Yeah, it's been really eye-opening to see how many opportunities there are to learn English without having to set aside huge chunks of time.
Exactly. And the key takeaway here is that it's all about finding what works for you and making it a part of your lifestyle.
Right. And I think the most important thing is to remember to have fun with it. When we enjoy the process, we're much more likely to stick with it.
Absolutely. So keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep embracing those mistakes along the way.
That's great advice. Well, thanks again for joining me today and for sharing all these wonderful tips.
It was my pleasure. And to all our listeners out there, keep practicing your English, and we'll be back next week with more fun and effective language learning strategies.
Until then, happy learning.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow and reach more English learners like you. By subscribing, you'll never miss a new episode, and by liking the video, you're letting us know you want more helpful content. Thank you for your support. It means so much to us.